Hi, I'm Carl Weber, and this is Video Aided Instructions English Grammar Series. The topic for this program is using pronouns correctly. As you recall, a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun or a group of nouns. The noun or group of nouns that the pronoun takes the place of is called its antecedent. Look at this sentence, for example. Angela called Khalid and invited him to go skating with her. Now, this sentence contains two pronouns, him and her, and each of these pronouns has an antecedent. The antecedent of him is Khalid, because that's the noun that the pronoun him takes the place of. The antecedent for her is Angela, because that's the noun that her takes the place of. Notice that those nouns could be substituted for the pronouns and the sentence would still mean the same thing. Angela called Khalid and invited Khalid to go skating with Angela. The sentence would mean the same thing, but it sounds rather awkward and repetitious, which is why we use pronouns instead. But a pronoun and its antecedent should always match. There are many different kinds of pronouns: he, him, she, her, it, we, some, any, who, which, someone. All of these words are pronouns of different kinds. Now, using pronouns can be tricky. In this program, we'll review some of the rules for using pronouns. We'll also look at examples of the kinds of errors people often make when using pronouns, and we'll show you how to avoid making those same mistakes. There are many kinds of pronouns. The four that are most important are personal pronouns, interrogative pronouns, indefinite pronouns, and relative pronouns. In this lesson, we'll look at each of these four types of pronouns and see how they're used in English sentences. First, personal pronouns. A personal pronoun refers to the person speaking, the person being spoken to, or the person or thing being spoken about. Some of the most common personal pronouns are I, me, you, he, him, she, her, it, we, us, they, and them. Now remember, we said that a personal pronoun may refer to the person speaking. Personal pronouns like I, me, we, and us refer to the person speaking. A personal pronoun may refer to the person being spoken to. There's only one pronoun that plays that role, you. Or a personal pronoun may refer to the person or thing being spoken about. And some of the pronouns that can play that role are he, him, she, her, it, they, and them. Notice that pronouns can be either singular or plural. As you recall, singular means referring to one thing or one person, while plural means referring to two or more things or persons. We saw a moment ago that pronouns and their antecedents need to match. One of the important ways in which a pronoun should always match its antecedent is in number. In other words, if the antecedent is singular, the pronoun should also be singular. If the antecedent is plural, the pronoun should also be plural. Notice one curious thing about the English language. The pronoun you can be both singular and plural. That's the only pronoun in the English language that works both ways. And because of the fact that there is no differentiation between singular and plural in the pronoun you, some linguists have theorized that English language speakers have invented a series of phrases and even new words to stand in for the plural you, which doesn't really exist. So this explains why you'll sometimes hear people use expressions like you people, you guys, yous, or down south, you all. There's no way to take the word you and turn it into a plural, so people have invented their own ways of turning you into a plural. So you can be both singular or plural. Unlike the other personal pronouns, there are no different singular and plural forms for that particular pronoun. The second important category of pronouns is interrogative pronouns. Now, you might recall that an interrogative sentence is a sentence that asks a question, and you might imagine that there's a connection between that kind of sentence and an interrogative pronoun. If that's what you're thinking, you're correct. An interrogative pronoun introduces a question. And there are 5 interrogative pronouns in English: who, whom, whose, which, and what. Now, the question that the interrogative pronoun introduces may be a direct question, in which case the sentence will end with a question mark, and the question is being asked directly of you, the person that hears the sentence. Here's an example. What do you feel like having for dinner tonight? This sentence ends with a question mark. It's asking a question of you, the person who hears the sentence, and notice that it begins with the interrogative pronoun what. On the other hand, the question may be an indirect question. Here's an example. Andre asked Mark what he wanted for dinner. Here, the question begins with the interrogative pronoun what, just like before. But it's an indirect question. It's not being asked directly of you, the person who hears the sentence. Instead, it's being described in the sentence as something that Andre asked Mark, and therefore it's considered an indirect question. And notice that neither the sentence nor the question ends with a question mark. But the same interrogative pronoun in this case has been used, what, to introduce, in this case, an indirect question. The third category of pronouns is indefinite pronouns. An indefinite pronoun refers to an unspecified person, place, thing, or idea. As you can see when we look at some examples of indefinite pronouns, these are words that refer in a somewhat vague way to one or more people, places, things, or ideas that are not specified or named in the sentence or anywhere near it. Here are some examples of indefinite pronouns: all, anyone, anything, both, each, everybody, many, no one, some, someone. And there are many other indefinite pronouns. You can probably make up for yourself some examples of sentences using these indefinite pronouns. Here are a couple to illustrate how indefinite pronouns might be used. All are invited to tonight's dance. Now, who's invited to tonight's dance? Have some specific people been named? No. Instead, anybody and everybody that's referred to by that indefinite pronoun all of those people are invited. Here's another example. Everybody is welcome. Here, the indefinite pronoun everybody is used as the subject of the sentence. And one more example. No one should feel shy about coming. Who should feel shy about coming? Has a person been named? No. Instead, the indefinite pronoun no one is used to indicate who should feel shy about coming. As you can see, indefinite pronouns don't contain a specific antecedent. Instead, they refer in a more general way to one or more people, places, things, or ideas that are not described or stated specifically in the sentence. But they're very useful words as long as they're used correctly according to some of the rules and procedures we'll talk about later in this program. And the fourth and final important category of pronouns is relative pronouns. A relative pronoun is used to introduce a subordinate clause. Now, you might recall from elsewhere in this series that there are 2 kinds of clauses that you need to be aware of that go to make up any English sentence. There are independent clauses and there are subordinate clauses. An independent clause can stand alone as a sentence. A subordinate clause cannot. When a subordinate clause tries to stand alone as a sentence, the result is a sentence fragment and a grammatical error. Instead, subordinate clauses are attached to independent clauses, and the resulting combination is a correct English sentence, known as a complex sentence. A relative pronoun is used to introduce a subordinate clause. There are just 5 relative pronouns in English: who, whom, whose, which, and that. You'll notice that some of the pronouns in this list also appeared in the list of interrogative pronouns, and there is some overlap. There are certain pronouns that can be used as either interrogative pronouns or relative pronouns. It all depends on how they're used in the sentence. When these pronouns are used as relative pronouns, what they are doing is introducing subordinate clauses and relating the subordinate clause to something specific in the independent clause. That's why they're called relative pronouns, because they relate the subordinate clause that they introduce to something specific in the independent clause. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Sean Connery was the first actor who portrayed the secret agent James Bond. Now here we have the relative pronoun who introducing the subordinate clause who portrayed the secret agent James Bond. Perhaps you can tell from the way that subordinate clause sounds that it can't stand alone as a sentence. It exists in the sentence to give more information about what kind of actor Sean Connery was. Sean Connery was the first actor is what the independent clause tells us, and the subordinate clause tells us exactly what kind of actor he was. He was the actor who portrayed the secret agent James Bond. So the entire subordinate clause introduced by the relative pronoun who relates back to the noun actor. Therefore, in a sense, the entire subordinate clause acts as a modifier, much like an adjective, giving more information about a specific noun in the independent clause. And that's how the subordinate clauses introduced by relative pronouns work. They work as modifiers, giving more information about a noun that appears in the independent clause. Here's another example. Dr. No was the movie that launched the James Bond film series. In this sentence, we have an independent clause, Dr. No was the movie, followed by the subordinate clause that launched the James Bond film series. The subordinate clause is introduced by the relative pronoun that, and the entire clause serves to modify or give more information about the noun movie. Dr. No was the movie. What kind of movie? The movie that launched the James Bond film series. So once again, we have a subordinate clause which is related to a specific noun that appears in the independent clause. The entire clause is a kind of a modifier, giving more information about that noun. So when you have a relative pronoun in a sentence, it is introducing a subordinate clause which acts as a modifier, giving more information about a noun that appears in the independent clause. So we've seen then that there are four kinds of pronouns that are commonly used in English sentences: personal pronouns, interrogative pronouns, indefinite pronouns, and relative pronouns. In the remainder of this program, we'll talk about some of the basic rules for using these kinds of pronouns correctly in English sentences. First, turn to your study guide. We've provided there an exercise that will enable you to test and practice your understanding of these four different categories of pronouns. Try your hand at the questions, and when you're finished, come back and we'll look at the questions together. Now, in each of the sentences in this exercise, your job is to first underline each of the pronouns that appears, and then second, decide concerning each pronoun whether it's a personal pronoun, an interrogative pronoun, an indefinite pronoun, or a relative pronoun. Let's start with the first sentence. Gordon was surprised when Angela invited him to visit her in Caracas. There are two pronouns in this sentence, him and her, and both of them are personal pronouns. So that's the answer to that question. Him and her are both pronouns, and both are personal pronouns. Next sentence. Who do you think will win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor this year? As you can see, this is an interrogative sentence, and that might be a clue to you that an interrogative pronoun appears in this sentence. And sure enough, it does. The very first word in the sentence, who, is an interrogative pronoun. Remember, an interrogative pronoun introduces a direct or indirect question, and there are just 5 interrogative pronouns in English: who, whom, whose, which, and what. And in this case, who is being used to introduce a direct question. There's also another pronoun in this sentence. Did you recognize it? You is also a pronoun, and it's a personal pronoun. Remember, we saw that personal pronouns may refer to the person being spoken to. And in this case, the pronoun you is being used in that way. So in this sentence, there are 2 pronouns. Who is an interrogative pronoun, and you is a personal pronoun. Let's look at the next sentence. If Luis wants to finish painting the garage by tomorrow, he will have to convince someone to help him. How many pronouns did you notice in this sentence? There are 3 altogether. He, someone, and him. All 3 appear in the second half of the sentence. Now, 2 of the pronouns are personal pronouns. He and him are both personal pronouns. The third pronoun, someone, is a different category. This is an indefinite pronoun. Notice how the indefinite pronoun someone refers to a person that is not specified. It doesn't say in the sentence who is going to help Luis with painting the garage. Probably Luis doesn't even know. And so an indefinite pronoun is used to indicate that the person being referred to is indefinite, unspecified, or unknown. And that's a typical use of an indefinite pronoun. Next question. The inventor Thomas Edison is the historical figure whom I admire most. In this sentence, there are two pronouns, whom and I. We'll do I, the easy one, first. That's a personal pronoun. And as we discussed earlier, a personal pronoun may refer to the person speaking. And that's who is being referred to by the personal pronoun I. What about whom? What kind of pronoun is that? Well, we've seen that whom can be used in more than one way. Whom may be used as an interrogative pronoun, can also be used as a relative pronoun. How is it being used in this case? Is it being used to introduce a question, either a direct question or an indirect question? No, it isn't. So therefore, whom is not an interrogative pronoun in this case. Instead, it's being used as a relative pronoun. It introduces the subordinate clause, whom I admire most. Remember that a clause always contains a subject and a verb. Here the subject is I, the verb is admire, and whom is the relative pronoun that introduces this subordinate clause and relates it back to the independent clause. In fact, the entire subordinate clause acts as a modifier, giving more information about the noun figure. So there are two pronouns here. Whom is a relative pronoun, and I is a personal pronoun. Next question. Joanne's grandmother asked her what she wanted to do that evening. In this sentence, there are three pronouns, her, what, and she. Two of the pronouns are personal pronouns, her and she. The third pronoun, what, is an interrogative pronoun. Remember, we saw that an interrogative pronoun can be used to introduce either a direct or an indirect question. In this case, the pronoun what is being used to introduce an indirect question. Joanne's grandmother is asking Joanne a question, namely, what she wanted to do that evening. And that question is being reported to us indirectly. So the pronoun what is an interrogative pronoun because it is introducing that indirect question. In this lesson, we're going to talk about one of the more tricky aspects of using pronouns correctly, namely pronoun case. Personal pronouns always take one of three different cases. Each case reflects a different way that the pronoun can be used in a sentence. And as we'll see, depending on which case is correct in a particular sentence, the actual form of the pronoun may change. The three cases are the subjective case, the objective case, and the possessive case. Let's take a moment to look at each of these cases and explain exactly how and when they should be used in an English sentence. First, the subjective case. The subjective case is used when the pronoun is a subject or a subject complement. As you recall, the most important word in any sentence is the verb. Now, the subject of the verb is the person, place, thing, or idea that